Imagine if one day you found a mysterious pencil that could bring anything you drew to life. Something very similar happens to a man whose life was once filled with poverty and struggle. But suddenly, he gains a power that changes everything. So let's start the story from the beginning. The story begins in a small town where a poor man named Huwaan lives. Huwaan is a painter who sits by the roadside drawing portraits of people to earn a living. His painting skills are truly exceptional. But despite his talent, he never receives the recognition he deserves. One day, an expensive sports car stops in front of him. A man named Ilong steps out of the car. Ilong is a famous painter in the city and enjoys a great reputation. However, the truth is that he is not actually a talented artist. Instead, he buys Huwaan's paintings and sells them under his own name. Ilong approaches Huwaan, takes one of his paintings, and pays him a small amount of money. Later, he sells the same painting at an auction for a huge profit. Huwaan knows very well that he is being cheated, but because he has no fame or influence, he is unable to do anything about it. The story then introduces Ilong's girlfriend, Lisa. Lisa used to be Huwaan's girlfriend, but she left him because she wanted a richer and more luxurious life. Now she lives with Ilong, and this deeply hurts Huwaan. Next, we see another side of Huwaan's life through his current girlfriend, Annie. Annie was born blind and works at a small salon as a massage therapist. Some customers try to take advantage of her, but because she desperately needs the money, she remains silent. One day, Huwaan suddenly arrives at the salon. When he sees a group of men harassing Annie, he immediately steps in and fights them. However, the men outnumber him and brutally beat him up. Even though he is badly injured, Annie stays by his side and takes care of him. After this, Huwaan's best friend, John, is introduced. John's parents threw him out of the house because he refused to take over the family business and instead wanted to become a painter. Now he lives with Huwaan. John has a crush on a TikTok star and constantly sends her expensive gifts to impress her. He spends most of his money trying to win her affection. When Huwaan tries to explain to John that he is wasting his time and money, John turns the argument around and tells Huwaan that his dream of becoming a successful painter is just as pointless. Hearing this, Huwaan falls silent. Later that night, the two friends sit on the rooftop, drinking together, and eventually fall asleep there. During the night, something extraordinary happens. Huwaan suddenly wakes up and notices something strange in the sky. To his shock, he sees an alien spaceship flying overhead. Amazed by what he is seeing, he secretly tries to take a picture of it. However, he forgets to turn off his camera's flash, which alerts the aliens that someone is watching them. The spaceship immediately disappears, but before leaving, it drops a strange rod-like object. Huwaan picks up the mysterious item and takes it home with him. The next morning, Huwaan tells his friend John everything that happened the previous night. He insists that he really saw aliens. However, John refuses to believe him and assumes it was nothing more than a dream or a hallucination. While talking, Huwaan notices the strange object he brought home. Seeing it makes him wonder if the incident was actually real after all. Later, in another scene, Huwaan is shown painting a picture for a child. As he continues painting, his pencil suddenly runs out of color. With nothing else available, he decides to use the strange rod like a pencil and draws a small circle on a piece of paper. Just a few seconds later, the circle suddenly transforms into a real stone. Huwaan is completely shocked by what he sees. To test it again, he draws an apple. Moments later, a real apple emerges from the painting. At that point, he realizes that the rod is no ordinary object. Excited, Huwaan immediately calls his friend John and tries to show him what happened. At first, John refuses to believe him. To prove it, Huwaan draws a gold bar on a piece of paper and asks John to watch carefully. Nothing happens right away, so John becomes annoyed, crumples up the paper, and throws it outside. Suddenly, they hear a loud noise from outside. When they rush to check, they discover that a real gold bar has fallen near the hostel owner. Now both of them are convinced that the mysterious rod is truly magical. The two friends then bring a much larger sheet of paper, and Huwaan draws an even bigger gold bar. Within moments, a real gold bar appears right in front of them. After witnessing this, they decide to keep the secret to themselves. Now Huwaan and John begin experimenting to understand the rod's power. They are fully convinced that it is no ordinary object. Anything drawn with it can become real in the physical world. The friends decide to use this incredible ability to make money, but they also agree to keep it hidden from everyone. They know that if the secret gets out, it could put them in great danger. At one point, John jokingly writes 200 million on a piece of paper. However, when it materializes, it does not become real money. Instead, it turns into a worthless plastic-like object with no value. This teaches them an important lesson. Everything must be drawn accurately and in detail. Huwaan then decides to test the theory himself. He carefully draws a detailed pile of banknotes, and this time, within moments, their room fills with a huge stack of real cash. Now they understand that only properly detailed creations can become real. Their lives begin to change rapidly. They start buying expensive clothes, wearing luxury brands, and completely transforming their lifestyle. They purchase expensive cars, and for vehicles that do not even exist in the market. They simply create them themselves. Later, Huwaan stands in front of the hostel owner and announces that he has already paid the rent of every painter living there for the next 100 years. Everyone is overjoyed and begins praising him. Soon after, Huwaan puts up a massive billboard that is even larger than Ailong's advertisements. On it, he proudly declares himself the #1 painter. Gradually, people across the city begin to recognize his name. Using the power of the mysterious rod, Huwaan then creates a magnificent palace. He draws a detailed picture of a grand mansion on paper, and within moments, the palace appears in the middle of the city. The unbelievable sight creates a sensation, and the entire city is left stunned. People cannot understand how any of this is possible. Before long, the police arrive at the scene and begin investigating the mysterious palace. During the investigation, Huwaan presses a button on the strange rod. Instantly, all the lines of the drawing are absorbed back into the rod, and at the same moment, the enormous palace suddenly disappears. Everyone is left even more shocked. Huwaan and John realize that not only can they create things with the rod, but they can also make them disappear. The two friends continue enjoying their new life. They create different things and turn their lives into one of complete luxury. One day, Huwaan takes Annie to the palace he created. He tells her that when he was poor, she was the only person who stood by his side. Because of that, he wants to give her a better life. At that moment, Huwaan proposes to Annie and promises to take care of her for the rest of his life. However, Annie refuses. She says that she is not worthy of him and does not deserve such a luxurious life. Her response upsets Huwaan a little, but he continues trying to convince her. Meanwhile, John's life also changes. The TikTok star he has always admired is impressed by the expensive gifts he keeps sending her and finally agrees to become his girlfriend. At the same time, strange reports begin emerging from different parts of the world. Objects are mysteriously disappearing. In one place, an entire palace vanishes and then reappears later. In another incident, a man is driving his car when it suddenly disappears, causing him to fall onto the road. Even money starts disappearing from banks. Then another shocking event makes headlines. A famous actress suddenly loses her eyes, which mysteriously disappear without explanation. These strange incidents put the police on high alert, and large-scale investigations begin. Meanwhile, Huwaan continues enjoying his life, completely unaware that these bizarre events are connected to the power of the mysterious rod. Eventually, Huwaan decides to tell Annie the truth. He explains that everything he owns and all of his wealth come from the magical rod. However, Annie does not believe him. She tells him that if his story is true, then he should create a pair of eyes for her. Huwaan immediately tries to help her. The first time, he draws a pair of eyes, but the experiment fails. Instead of working properly, separate eyes simply appear outside the drawing. Determined to succeed, he tries again. This time, Huwaan carefully draws a complete portrait of Annie, including her face, body, and eyes. As soon as the painting is finished, Annie is suddenly pulled into the artwork. A few moments later, she emerges from it once again. This time, the miracle works. For the first time in her life, Annie can actually see. Overwhelmed with emotion, she looks around at the world she has never seen before. Then she turns toward Huwaan and sees his face for the very first time, leaving her deeply moved and emotional. This is a very important moment in Annie's life. However, at the same time, the strange incidents occurring around the world continue to increase. The police begin to suspect that there is a major reason behind all these mysterious events. Reports start coming in from different places about valuable objects suddenly disappearing and then reappearing somewhere else later. The police also notice that some luxury cars recently reported as stolen look exactly like the cars owned by Huwaan and John. This makes them even more suspicious of the two friends. Later, Huwaan and John visit Lao Zhou, who works in an art gallery. They give him a large amount of money and ask him to organize a free art exhibition and auction for poor and unknown painters. Their goal is to give talented artists a chance to showcase their work, even if they have no fame or connections. Lao Zhou is delighted by the idea and agrees to organize the event. Soon, posters promoting the exhibition are displayed all over the city. Meanwhile, Ilong becomes extremely angry when he sees what is happening. He cannot understand how Huwaan, who was once so poor, suddenly became incredibly wealthy. He becomes convinced that there must be a big secret behind Huwaan's success. Around the same time, Lisa talks to Ilong and tells him that he should not worry so much about Huwaan. However, Ilong feels that Lisa is comparing him to Huwaan. This makes him furious, and he begins treating Lisa badly. Eventually, Ilong contacts the police and informs them that Huwaan has suddenly become rich and may be involved in illegal activities. The day of the exhibition finally arrives. A huge crowd gathers to attend the event, and for the first time, Huwaan's paintings begin selling for impressive prices. One of his artworks is sold for as much as 300,000 won, something that would have been unimaginable in the past. But while the exhibition is in full swing, the police suddenly arrive and begin questioning Huwaan. They ask him where all his money came from. The officers also point out that several of his cars closely resemble vehicles that were recently reported stolen. As the investigation begins, Huwaan finds himself under growing suspicion, and the secret of the mysterious rod faces it. This makes the police suspect that Huwaan may be involved in the thefts. At that moment, John steps forward and asks the officers whether they have any concrete evidence against them. Since the police have no solid proof, they are unable to arrest Huwaan and eventually leave. However, they begin keeping a close watch on both Huwaan and John. Later, when Huwaan returns home, he starts thinking deeply about everything that has happened. Gradually, he comes to a shocking realization. The objects he creates are not actually being created from nothing. Instead, they seem to be disappearing from somewhere else in the world and reappearing wherever he draws them. In other words, he is not creating new things. He is unknowingly transferring them from one place to another. The realization leaves him stunned. He immediately remembers the eyes he created for Annie. If his theory is correct, those eyes may have belonged to someone else. Around the same time, news reports continue discussing the famous actress whose eyes mysteriously disappeared. Huwaan begins to fear that Annie may have received those very eyes. The thought deeply troubles him. That night, another important event takes place. Lisa, who had been abused by Ilong, comes to Huwaan's house. She wants to speak with him privately. As they sit together, they talk about their past and reminisce about old memories. Lisa apologizes for leaving him years ago. Huwaan tells her that it was not her fault. He understands that he was poor at the time, and she simply wanted a better life. As the conversation continues, Huwaan ends up revealing his biggest secret. He tells Lisa everything about the mysterious rod and explains that it is the reason his life changed so dramatically. What Huwaan does not know is that Ilong has secretly placed a hidden camera on Lisa. Through it, he watches their entire conversation and learns everything about the rod's incredible power. The next day, Huwaan, John, Annie, and John's girlfriend sit together to discuss what they should do. Huwaan explains that everything they have created is essentially stolen property. Hearing this, everyone becomes serious. John argues that if they return everything, their lives will go back to the way they were before. He then asks Huwaan a difficult question. Does he really want Annie to become blind again? Huwaan has no answer, but then Annie speaks up. She says that she would rather be blind again than continue living with someone else's eyes. Her words move everyone emotionally. John's girlfriend also says that even after learning the truth, she still wants to stay with him. Eventually, the four of them make a decision. They agree to hand the mysterious rod over to the police so that nobody can misuse its power. However, when they go to retrieve it, they discover that the rod is gone. They immediately realize that someone has stolen it. It does not take long for them to suspect Ilong, since he was the only person who knew their secret. Meanwhile, the story reveals that the rod has indeed fallen into Ilong's hands. As soon as he learns about its abilities, he begins using it without hesitation. The first thing he creates is a massive, ultra-modern art exhibition center, unlike anything the world has ever seen. But his greed quickly grows. He does not stop with the exhibition center. Soon, he creates an enormous royal palace as well. The palace is not built in an ordinary location. It appears in a highly important area, causing panic and concern among the people nearby. With the magical rod now in the hands of a far more selfish and ambitious person, the danger becomes greater than ever before. Ilong begins to see himself as a king. He moves into the grand palace and starts believing that he is the most powerful person in the world. Soon, he forcibly brings a famous beauty queen to the palace because he wants to make her his queen. He sets up a grand stage and publicly announces that he is now the king of the entire kingdom and that the young woman will become his queen. Meanwhile, the police learn about the palace and Ilong's actions. They realize that something is seriously wrong and begin preparing to intervene. At the same time, Huwaan and his friends also head to the palace to stop Elon. When they arrive, they find the area already filled with chaos and tension. Huwaan tries to reason with Elon. He explains that the rod is not actually a magical object. Instead, it simply transfers things from one place to another. This means that everything Elon has been creating is actually being stolen from someone else, somewhere in the world. However, Elon refuses to listen. He argues that this is how the world works, that whenever someone gains something, it is taken from someone else. Blinded by greed, he refuses to accept the truth. Just then, the police arrive and attempt to arrest him. But Elon has no intention of surrendering. He declares that he will leave Earth and go somewhere beyond the reach of any law. He announces that he is going to live on the moon. To make this possible, he uses the rod to create a spaceship. However, as soon as the spaceship appears, it turns out to be the very same alien spacecraft that had originally visited Earth. A short time later, several aliens emerge from the ship. They immediately ask Huwaan where their machine is. Huwaan instantly understands what they mean and points toward Elon, who is still holding the mysterious rod. But the situation quickly becomes even more dangerous. Trying to protect himself, Elon creates a tank and begins using it as a weapon. He attempts to intimidate the police and everyone around him. The aliens respond by using their advanced powers. They twist the tank's cannon around until it points directly back at Elon. Seeing this, Elon becomes terrified. His confidence collapses, and he realizes that he has no way out. With no other choice, he finally hands the rod back to the aliens. The aliens then reveal a surprising truth. The rod was never a magical pencil at all. It was actually a maintenance machine from their spaceship, designed to collect and remove waste material. Over time, its tip had worn down and become shaped like a pencil, which is why it produced such strange effects when used for drawing. They also explain that this damage was the reason the device could no longer fit properly into their spacecraft. The aliens are furious and prepare to punish Elon for misusing their technology. However, before they can do anything, Huwaan steps forward. He honestly admits the truth, that he was the first person to use the machine and that many of the problems began because of his own actions. Accepting responsibility, Huwaan openly confesses his mistake and asks the aliens to consider the full story. Seeing Huwaan's honesty, the aliens calm down. They tell him that there are still people in this world who have the courage to tell the truth. Huwaan then makes a request. He asks the aliens to restore everything to the way it was before and return all the objects to their rightful owners. The aliens ask him if he is truly prepared for that decision, because it would mean losing all his wealth, luxury, and comfort. Without any hesitation, Huwaan says yes. The aliens then use their technology to reverse everything that had been created with the machine. The palace disappears, the money is returned, and all the valuable items are sent back to their original owners. As a result, Annie's eyes are also returned to their rightful owner, causing her to become blind once again. At the same time, another unexpected thing happens. The alien spaceship also disappears because it had originally been recreated using the same device. Afterward, the aliens find a way to return to their home planet. Meanwhile, everything that Elon had gained through the machine also vanishes. His palace, possessions, and wealth all disappear. Even the clothes he was wearing are taken back, leaving him almost naked. The police then arrest him for assaulting Lisa, and a legal case is filed against him. In the final scenes of the story, some time has passed. Huwaan is once again sitting by the roadside, painting portraits just as he did at the beginning of the story. His life has returned to what it was before. He is still poor, and his paintings do not sell for high prices. However, this time there is something different. There is a sense of peace on his face. Although he has lost all the wealth and luxury he once had, he knows that he made the right choice. He chose honesty, responsibility, and doing what was right over keeping power and riches that never truly belonged to him. And with that, the story comes to an end. I hope you like it. Thank you for watching. See you in next story.